Ultimately, my biggest fear is what humanity will do to itself out of fear and greed, and what we have done. We have built a prison around ourselves. It's invisible, but it's not complete, and there is still time to maybe alter our trajectory, have a different future. May not be the best one that we had hoped for, but it's going to be damn sight better than what they have planned for us.
You know there's no going back after you tell us this on camera. We had this conversation. This is it. This is the line in the sand. You're about to cross over here.
Absolutely. I am, on a personal level, giving up the future that I made for myself and was going to try to make for a family. I'm proud of what I accomplished in my time in government, and it's painful to leave the good people there and to know that there really isn't room for people to act according to their conscience and our constitutional ideals.
In the last 10 days, 2 mind-blowing interviews have dropped. The first was with Harold Malmgren, presidential advisor, national security expert, on the American Alchemy podcast with Jesse Michaels. And in that interview, Malmgren describes from a top-level view the sort of strategic picture of what he was aware of vis-a-vis the UFO recovery and reverse engineering program and the cover-up. And that was a deathbed confession by someone in a position to know quite a bit about what is going on. A few days after that interview dropped, however, another interview surfaced on Weaponized with George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell, and this interview was with a guy named Matt Brown. Matt Brown is an intelligence analyst who worked within the Pentagon on various things for a number of years, had access to classified servers where a lot of UFO, UAP-related information is transacted between different intelligence groups and agencies and people who need it, people who are requesting it, people who have the intelligence. It moves through this system. And Matt Brown, in this interview, reveals quite a bit from the lower level where he was at about what happened, what he saw, the information he was exposed to, and how this program works. He talks in some detail about the program that we now have come to know as Immaculate Constellation. He explains what that is, why it exists, how it functions, and he talks about some of the things that he saw regarding intelligence about UAPs. And one of them is really astonishing. When he describes it, it's amazing. So in case you haven't had a chance to watch both of these interviews, the Malmgren interview is almost 4 hours long. It's a long interview. And the Matt Brown interview is about 45 minutes. It's part 1 of three parts that will eventually be released. I'm going to give you the top 5 moments from Matt Brown's interview with George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell. We'll take a look at those now. But hey, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel or consider subscribing. It doesn't cost anything. It only takes a second, and it really does help us out. Don't forget to like and share this video. And thank you in advance for being a part of Team Night Shift. You can go to teamnightshift.com and check us out there. Now, let's take a look at the first clip from the top 5 moments from Matt Brown's interview.
Could you give us a general description of the size of the secrecy apparatus? You know, we're going to drill down into this, of course, about IMCON and one particular facet of the secrecy that you came across and other parts of it. But how big of a secrecy apparatus is it? How many stovepipes are there? How many people are involved in different ways of keeping this secret, confusing the public, lying to Congress, lying to the world?
Simply put, it's a parallel reality. The secrecy apparatus is all pervasive. It is not just in the intelligence community governing their world. It's not just in the military protecting their operations. It's not protecting our diplomats and leaders as they conduct their work, sometimes in very dangerous places. It has been allowed to corrupt and infest every aspect of our society to serve the interests and whims of a very elite, select few.
Okay, this is really interesting because this is more or less what Stephen Greer has been saying for upwards of 25 years now, that there is a small, extremely elite group of well-positioned people in positions of great power and influence that are behind the program, which is itself held to a higher standard of secrecy than the nuclear program, as both Malmgren spoke about and Matt Brown in this interview touches on. So that's interesting because Stephen Greer has sort of remained on the sidelines of the larger disclosure conversation that seems to be taking place within the political sphere, if you will. And I think that's fair, right? Like there's been a lot of questions within the community about what's going on with Stephen Greer. There's a lot of friction between Greer and other people in the community. And I don't think that's necessarily accidental. Something doesn't add up here, and I can't quite put my finger on what it is, but it seems like, according to Matt Brown is saying here, that Stephen Greer is on the money. And other people have described an oppressive system of secrecy. Bob Lazar talked about this. He said it was almost impossible for them to make meaningful progress in their respective areas of research because one research group that was working on maybe the energy system for a craft couldn't talk to the propulsion people who were working on the propulsion system or trying to figure out what the materials people were doing. And because of that siloed system, they were sort of frozen. And I've also heard estimates that the secrecy, the cost of budgeting the security necessary to cover up a program of this magnitude is upwards of 7 to 10 times the cost of the actual program itself. So at this point, we're talking about trillions of dollars. We must be over decades and decades. And according to what we're hearing from people like Stephen Greer and now Matt Brown and others, there is a very small group of people at the very top of this. As a matter of fact, when I had an opportunity to interview Danny Sheehan, he and I were talking off air, and he mentioned to me, sort of casually, he was like, I've met some of the people at the higher levels of what we would consider the cover-up. And their attitude is like, we would let this information out, but only if we can own the information. We have to make money off of this. We're talking about changing the entire way the world functions by virtue of this knowledge coming out. Still a question mark in my mind, is there one master control program that is sort of top-down managed, managing all these other moving parts, or if there are several programs running parallel to one another, each one maybe at a different level of progress in the respective area where they're working. I suspect that's probably more likely, but I don't know. I do imagine that it is likely that by now, by this stage, and the program, air quotes on program, but the program or programs to reverse engineer recovered UAPs or UFOs, that program has now been in operation long enough that there have been numbers of people that have come and gone. Companies have maybe changed hands, and there has been plenty of time for that cross-pollination to take place of ideas. And that spread has now made it very difficult for them to keep the lid on all of this stuff. There's just too many people that have now been involved at some level or another. And many of them are coming forward. Very interesting point. I wonder who this elite group is. How small is small? Are we talking about 10, 20 people, 100 people, 500 people? Is it a corporation? Is it a group of private individuals? Is it a mega bank? Is it a bunch of banks? Is it the CIA? Who knows? But a small group of elites at the very, very top. That tracks, at least according to Stephen Greer. Let's go on to the next clip and see what he has to say.
A collection incident in the Pacific Ocean. The subject of collection is several Russian naval intelligence vessels in the middle of the ocean at night. And above those vessels is a large black triangle floating in the air. This is a still image, but it is color.
Okay, so that's the first kind of event, but what was the mission? What was the mission? That's what people want to know, is what was the mission of Immaculate Constellation as described in the product?
So in the product itself, you had to piece together the mission by reading the whole thing and kind of putting together the parts. It never spelled out fully, like as it should, the mission. of the SAP. And I assume that's because this is a type of brief where there will be inserts to the deck, which would be inserted by the SAP control officer during the briefing that would provide another level of detail. But based on the information included in there and its description, the mission becomes apparent. And that is a bare minimum. It's the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance mission of a global nature for UAPs and RVs, ARVs. The hesitation there is some time has passed. One of those acronyms is in there, either RV or ARV, and that is how the triangle, in this case, was labeled.
It's been 7 years. So as you're reading through this and that you're remembering RV or ARV just for our audience. So RV is, reverse
reproduction
vehicle.
Yeah.
And the ARV would mean alien, anomalous reproduction.
We see, people in the literature say alien reproduction vehicle. It could just be anomalous,
advanced,
or advanced. It could be anything that can go after A.
So you don't know what that is. But
I don't.
This is a pretty interesting image here.
It is. And then the text that accompanies it describes the incident.
And what can you tell us?
The summary of that is just how it unfolded. I should actually back up and say the image itself was unique. This isn't by a plane or a satellite. It looks to be a image pretty close to the waterline. So something that to me read is we have a clandestine submersible asset close by this fleet, and it's taking pictures, trying to stay unnoticed. And so, yes, in the description, it basically lays out what occurred that night, which was that our collection assets were there in area monitoring Russian naval vessels. Not sure what they're doing there. But they've been hanging out in the middle of the ocean in this place, apparently, for a few days. Keep an eye on them. And this night, while they are observing the Russian vessels, a large black triangle materializes or decloaks or something. The point is it did not move. It appeared directly above these ships, probably no more than 200 meters, pretty close. And interestingly, as noted in the report itself, there was no visible reaction from these vessels from what would almost certainly be considered a hostile approach.
What do you take away from that? They didn't notice it, or they're not upset about it, or they don't know what to do with it, or what?
So the implication also in the text describing it was, the analysis in the text was that the Russian Navy had foreknowledge that this vehicle would appear in that area of the ocean, and they were there specifically to either collect on it themselves or to interact with it in some way.
Any indication that it might be theirs, that they knew it's going to be there because they control it?
Not in that document, and I haven't seen anything to make me think that they controlled that particular craft, but didn't see anything to the contrary either.
I guess it could be that they've seen it before, that there's nothing they can do about it, so don't get excited about it.
Might be, although it is interesting, if it's something that's part of their environment, as it were, why are they making an effort to be in this space at this time to collect on something they already know about?
Is it like in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah, it's off the coast of Kamchatka, as I recall, in the Pacific Ocean.
That's what struck me. I mean, my mind goes to the idea that they were kind of camped out, deep kind of ocean in this one specific area durationally. It kind of implies to me, if I'm thinking outside the box here, there's some form of comms or communication with whoever the operators are of this craft. Am I going too far with that idea? Or?
I think it's a reasonable one to have, but it's not one that I can validate.
Yeah, let's be clear. You were exposed to something. We're just touching the basics here. We're theorizing. We're talking about a bunch of stuff we don't know, but the descriptions that you were exposed to kind of give you a little insight that we can at least look at some of those assumptions.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay. Again, this is one more instance out of many that we're aware of triangular shaped craft appearing in or around our military assets, being sighted by our ships and apparently by the Russian Navy. The question, of course, is, were they there to meet this thing? Were they in control of this thing? Certainly the craft itself sounds massive, and it appears out of nowhere. It decloaks, as Matt Brown describes it. He says it sort of decloaks or revealed itself about 200 meters away from these Russian intelligence naval assets. And then we have apparently our own intelligence gathering asset out deployed in that area, which apparently is some kind of submersible. And it catches all of this in a digital image, which is probably part of a video, a longer video, for all we know. And so Matt Brown comes into contact with this as he's searching around in his, with the access that he has. And it's interesting because this is not the only time we've heard about triangular craft. And I remembered reading about this in Ingo Swann's book, Penetration. Ingo Swann, of course, is the Michael Jordan of remote viewing. He worked with Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff. There's Russell Targ's book, The Reality of ESP. Here you go. At Stanford Research Institute, in the Stargate program, which later went on to become the military and intelligence remote viewing program. He actually established, Ingo, the remote viewing protocols that would later go on to be taught to a whole generation of remote viewers. In his book, Penetration, in page 70, there's a chapter called Seeing One. And in this chapter, he says he's brought out to a very, very, very remote location with a guy who goes by the name Axelrod. Axelrod is a representative of the program or some arm of the program, but he's an intelligence person who is connected to this program. And he brings Ingo and two security guys out to this very remote location where they are camped out basically in the forest near a lake waiting for something to happen. And in the book, he describes seeing basically what Matt Brown just described here. He says, there we were, four of us, sitting silently like rocks, but suddenly the two twins gave some kind of hand signal. It's begun, Axel whispered. Please, please do not make any noise and do not move unless we tell you to. My eyeballs rolled around trying to perceive what had begun. I couldn't see anything unusual at all, save for what appeared to be some gray fog forming up in the direction of the lake. I thought it was just morning fog. This fog continued forming for about 5 minutes, and suddenly I saw what had begun. For in a moment's eye flicker, the gray fog changed first into luminous neon blue and then into an angry purple. At that point, Axel and one of the twins put a firm hand on each of my shoulders, and it was a good thing they did. A network of purple, red, and yellow lightning bolts shot out in all crazy directions through the cloud, and I would have jumped up if not held down. And then there it was, something transparent at first, but in the next second, as if fading up, like the movie term, out of nowhere, there it was, solidly visible over the lake whose reflecting waters I could now clearly see, and it was getting bigger. I don't know what I had expected, but I had assumed that what I would see, if anything, would be something like a flying saucer. No chance of a saucer here, baby, because it was triangular. Its top angle sort of inverted in pulses so that overall it appeared to be diamond-shaped. And that's from Penetration by Ingo Swann, his account of seeing a triangular or diamond-shaped craft. This is just one more data point on a very interesting and rich history of seeing such craft appear. So let's go on to the next clip and see what he has to say.
My hope is that the stakes are not paid out, but they are life imprisonment and the possibility of execution.
And you've tried all the right ways. I've helped you on some of it. We've tried. You have tried all the right ways to do this, but you have something much bigger that is pushing on you, that you have to take this next step forward. And so now, I just want people to understand where you're coming from. When we say we protect whistleblowers, when people come to us, not everybody goes on camera, but also just you work currently in Department of State, but maybe he should tell us his history.
Yeah, let's do chronological. So you got a degree in what?
So I got a degree in international affairs, came out to DC, started working in a small think tank. From there, I applied to and was accepted to a intelligence agency. Ended up taking a job at the Pentagon, basically waiting for the right opportunity for that world to pop up. Which when it did, I was having too much fun, so I said no.
You're in the Pentagon. weapons of mass destruction as a general umbrella under which you're working. Did you got a security clearance at that point?
Yeah, I had been cleared by DIA for a top secret SCI clearance.
You get to see, I guess, firsthand all this different information that comes in from all over these places, different platforms, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're exposed to that, and you get an idea of just how big that apparatus is.
Yes, absolutely. UFOs and aliens aside, it's a different world without anything exotic in it when you are exposed to that information and learning over time, not just from the intelligence, but the experiences of the people around you, because not everything that's true and has happened in the world is written down on paper.
I mean, you're given a lot of roles and responsibilities that gives you access to very sensitive information. When you said SCI, that's secret compartmentalized information is the acronym.
Sensitive. Compartmentalized information.
Yeah, it's probably right.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? But I'm just saying, you are a sane human being. You're given a lot of these responsibilities. I just think it's important for people to understand. So you have access to very critical information through the United States government that's separate from the UFOs and the alien, topic that we're going to talk about.
For the world.
For the world.
For the U.S. and the world.
Yes.
And that weighs heavy on you, I'm sure. Like you're really looking to defend the United States of America where you live, and you are looking at information that is just highly sensitive. I think it's important for people to know. Good people like you doing great jobs in there. You had access and responsibilities. People trust you. That's you can't get there without that.
It is, it's a very burdensome role. I feel deeply for the people who have been there for many years. There's a lot of hidden suffering that comes from it, but it is I thought it was a noble and good mission. I still do.
Watching his body language, it's clear to me that he is extremely nervous. He's extremely tense. He's very fearful for his own safety and security, which makes perfect sense. He seems like an empathetic person. He seems like someone who is one of us, like a regular person, maybe a person who is in an extraordinary position to see some pretty unbelievable things, but did and reacted with a normal human reaction of astonishment, curiosity, fear, and a desire to make the truth known for the betterment of all of us at great personal risk. That's what it takes. If you think back historically, recently there have been a couple of figures. Edward Snowden jumps to mind. Julian Assange jumps to mind. People who ran hard against the secrecy apparatus of the ruling elite and found themselves in terrible situations. Edward Snowden, of course, had to famously seek asylum in Russia, of all places. And Julian Assange was basically confined to living in the he was the Ecuadorian embassy for how many years in London? He lived in a single room, more or less, in an office. So it's real and it's scary, and they can come after you. I think David Grush said that he came home. I think this was in an interview with Jesse Michaels, that he came home to find in his home a note that was written to him to let him know that people had gained access to his house and they could get to him anytime. And just these types of intimidation techniques are horrifying. And I think that's worth taking a moment to consider, because there is a lot of there are a lot of people in the community who are upset that more whistleblowers don't come forward and spill the beans on what they know. And I think that it's frustrating because on the one hand, I understand their frustration, right? Like if you have the beans, spill them. And like, we all want this to be over with. We don't want to get to the other side of this thing. But conversely, if you are the person in possession of said beans and you're considering spilling them, it's real for you. It's real in a way that it's not for someone sitting on the other side of a screen at their computer watching it on Reddit unfold like a movie. For the people involved, this is real life. This is real consequences. Your career is at stake. If you're in your mid 30s to late 30s and you've spent, 15 years in a career that you've built over time and you've put all of your effort and energy and time and education and resources into building it, and that's taken away from you and you have to start over suddenly. That's a real consequence that kneecaps you for your entire life. To say nothing of somebody who has a family and children and who's established and if that is all threatened, the stress must be astronomical on someone. And you could see this in Matt Brown's body language. Look how tense he is. Look at his face. Look how he's pained by some of the things that he's trying to say. It's very interesting to watch, and that's one of the things that always registers with me when I watch these interviews is how the person talks about what it is they're talking about. And does their response feel natural and human to me? Am I getting that gut instinct about this person that this is someone I would trust if I was in the room with them to be telling me real information? And I get that from him. Let's go on to the next clip, and then we'll wrap it up.
You said with these nuclear facilities, nuclear weapons, nuclear labs, nuclear power plants, that within a year or two, are you saying all of them get visited, or are there some strange phenomena?
I can't say that they all do, but I would suspect that, anything that is sufficiently nuclear will draw attention at some point and they will be encountering this.
And what are they? What do you see it? What kinds of things are you seeing?
So, nothing too dramatic when it comes to like these facilities. A lot of times it's orbs of, it's hard to always judge the size, but I'd be surprised if it's bigger than a Cessna, probably somewhere in between. Whether it's white or silverish, or if you're looking through different sensor apparati, it'll, look like whatever hot or cold is. But usually orbs around these facilities, sometimes things that look a bit more irregular, but the vast majority being orbs.
The world's been exposed to some of this. There's been a clarification to the general public about what are you seeing when you're seeing infrared or FLIR. It takes some translation. There are people that focus on that, like they can read that. But basically, you're looking at things that don't have flight control surfaces, that don't have traditional propulsion. They seem to tag along, which we've heard forever, with nuclear events, that kind of thing, nuclear structure. But you see a lot of these, you start getting exposed to them. Just to begin, doesn't that start to kind of feed that curiosity in you? You just all of a sudden, the average person, but you're now seeing stuff that you can't.
Yeah, you have to be a special kind of boring to not be interested after seeing those states. It's shocking, especially knowing the context of what you're looking at.
Right, which you get when you have those systems that can look at that.
100%.
What's the context? What like big picture? Like what's the context?
Yeah, and in this way, you're seeing images. Is there discussion? Is there text that comes along with this? Hey, we saw this thing. What the hell is it? It's not us.
Surprisingly little of that. I think the community kind of knows or knew we don't talk about this. It's there. That changed some years ago, but it's since been, I think, shut down again in terms of community participation in solving the problem.
So people within the intelligence community know you don't talk about this out loud. You don't say the quiet part out loud. You post stuff, you kind of get, then you get an era of discussion when this starts coming forward, 2017 New York Times story. But then you're explaining that there's been a kind of clampdown on that dialogue and discussion. I've heard that from a lot of people on the inside. You witnessed that too?
Yes, absolutely. Both firsthand and from, hearing from friends and connections. Yes. The screws were tightened, and certain agencies, you're not allowed to mention certain whistleblowers' names or you'll be fired immediately.
So there's no announcement on the PA system. There's no leaflets left in the cafeteria. No memo put out that says, don't talk about this stuff, but
Yeah. You pick up on that vibe real quick.
When you say there's certain whistleblowers' names you can't mention, this brings me back to a friend of ours when George was doing his news report on Bob Lazar, first time it was going to air, he just said, when he was up at Area 52, he just said, hey, you should pay attention to the news. His career was over. He got pulled into a room the next day. I would call him a friend of ours. I interviewed him about it. I mean, that was done. He just mentioned to watch George's news report. Again, we're not equating Bob Lazar to anything, but we were just saying that happened. So what do you mean if you mention certain whistleblowers? Who?
David Grush.
You can't mention David Grush in certain professional settings or you are fucked.
Yeah, if you're not fired, you are in for a very rough time, is my understanding.
Elizondo?
I didn't hear Elizondo as a no-go word.
Saying David Grush testified in open Congress, so that makes sense. So what have you seen it happen? Have you seen people mention his name? How do you become aware you can't even talk about him?
So that specific example, heard from a friend at that agency, that was essentially the word of mouth from management. Nothing written in paper, nothing in emails. Mm-hmm. But from what it sounds like, people got a conversation with their leadership and were told as much as we've just gone over. And his name was absolutely, in the first-hand experience, sort of radioactive in the chat rooms. It would either, all of a sudden, these people that never participate are there really slamming him and slamming the people talking about him.
On the classified internet.
Indeed.
Our space is one we've talked about a bunch, but these where people had open dialogue, it just got to clamp down. And his name was part of that. That's what you meant when you said certain people are radioactive. You can't mention their names.
Right.
Okay.
Including us.
And good, yeah. We're nuclear. Yeah. He's radioactive.
Okay.
With different designation.
Okay, two things here. Of course, the nuclear connection, which is fascinating for a lot of different reasons. The fact that it seems like all of our, as Matt Brown says, sufficiently nuclear facilities, ships, submarines, weapons, those things draw the attention of UAP. And he says that more often than not, most often it seems like they're seeing orbs appear around these nuclear sites or assets. He describes the orbs as no bigger than a Cessna, which is a very interesting description because it sounds almost exactly like the conversation that was happening a few months ago about the New Jersey drone situation. I don't know how much you remember of that, but people were saying, yeah, these things look like regular drones, but they're big. They're like a Cessna size or like an SUV size. And that was a flap of sightings that still to this day has no explanation, no reasonable explanation from any politician that we've heard up to and including President Trump, who said he would, on like day one of his administration, he was going to answer the question, what are these drones? And of course he did not do that. So very interesting how frequently these are being cited, so frequently, in fact, that it's kind of boring within the know, the people who are in the know. Second interesting point, that certain names are radioactive, and one of those names is David Grush, and that even mentioning David Grush's name will get you pulled into an office and you'll have a sit-down conversation with management about, I guess, how fucked you are by even talking about it. It seems like they were really trying to clamp down on conversations about David Grush and other whistleblowers because, of course, they don't want that idea getting into people's minds that this is a heroic, noble thing and that they should start thinking about ways to expose this information. So they demonize and David Grush and discourage conversation about him by clamping down on people who write his name down, say it out loud, mention it in an email, say it in a conversation, whatever. That's very, very interesting. Also kind of interesting that they don't talk about Lou Elizondo at all. There was not really any mention of that. You can draw your own conclusions from that, but interesting. It's an interesting data point. I'm not saying it necessarily means anything, but I think it's compelling that that's the level of concern here, that it's almost like the disclosure domino effect is what they're really terrified of. As one person comes forward and gets information out, other people who may know have a piece of the puzzle or a bit of information that they want to share might be emboldened to come forward also. And so institutionally, they are punishing anybody who even shows an interest in this conversation. So the contagion has spread, it would seem, and that's of concern to the people in charge. In another part of this interview that we don't have time for today, he talks about who a lot of the people are that he's working with, and he says they're private military contractors, not actually military, that within the Pentagon, there are entire offices, entire sections of stuff that are just turned over to private corporations to run for the military. And a lot of the people that he's dealing with are related to that. So it's almost like a parallel security system that exists outside of the normal military intelligence security system. I don't know. It's amazingly confusing how it all works, but very interesting points here. Let's go on to our last clip, and then we'll come back and wrap it up.
The mission becomes apparent, and that is a bare minimum. It's the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance mission of a global nature for UAPs and RVs, ARVs. The hesitation there is some time has passed. One of those acronyms is in there, either RV or ARV, and that is how the triangle in this case was labeled.
It's been 7 years. So as you're reading through this and that you're remembering RV or ARV just for our audience. So RV is, reverse
reproduction
vehicle.
Yeah.
And the ARV would mean alien, anomalous reproduction.
We see, people in the literature say alien reproduction vehicle. It could just be anomalous,
advanced,
or advanced. It could be anything that can go after A.
Okay, this is super important. There is a global effort to identify, track, bring down, recover UFO, UAP craft, and what they're calling ARVs. And according to Stephen Greer, for over 20, 25 years now, he's been saying ARVs are what he calls alien reproduction vehicles. That is, these are craft that have been built by human hands based on reverse engineered non-human technology that has been recovered over the decades by the program. That's an interesting data point. Now, there's some debate here in this interview as to what the A and ARV actually means, but if you take Stephen Greer at his word, he has been saying for a long time now, this is alien reproduction vehicles. And it begs the question, if a company, a military contractor like a Lockheed Martin or someone else, successfully cracked the code on UFO propulsion or power generation or whatever, there's almost no incentive for them to share that with anyone else, right? Like what incentive would they have? You're talking about a technology that is basically magic, more or less. It's the same. It would be like having a golden goose or the goose that lays the golden egg. You would never want to give that up. And so there would be a tremendous incentive, I think, to triple down and continue developing that in-house secretly, because it just gives you a complete asymmetric advantage over everyone else, up to and including the military of the United States and every other government in the world. As a private group or as a private corporation, you would have the most bleeding edge technology anywhere. So no reason to share that with anyone. Richard Dolan has speculated at great length on this. He's talked about what he calls the secret space program or the breakaway civilization. And this is the idea that, a group in possession of such technology, once they mastered it or cracked the code, would break off from our society. Like, why bother with all the messiness of trying to explain it to people and disclosure and all of the legal stuff? I mean, you've basically got beyond light speed transportation to anywhere you want to go in the cosmos. Why not start going places and doing things? It's a very interesting hypothesis, and I suspect there is some truth to it, at least. I mean, if they've got these craft, they've got to be testing them, right? There's a really interesting interview with a guy named Mark McCandlish on Stephen Greer's YouTube channel. If you search YouTube on Stephen Greer's channel, you'll find it. Mark McCandlish, of course, is a aerospace illustrator who did technical schematic drawings for various military contractors over the years. He's dead now, but when he was alive, he gave a great interview with Stephen Greer, and he talked about being told about, from someone who was a firsthand witness, 3 different craft. I think there were 3 craft that were on display in a hangar at an air show that was a private air show for people on the inside of the military industrial community, complex community. And he called it the Flux Liner. And it was 3 different craft, all based on the same design. And they said that they looked beat up and run down in like an old car that's been just like banged up and really broken in. And he said that based on the description he was given, he was able to go create a schematic drawing of what this thing looked like. And it more or less looks like a flying saucer, a sort of a clunky, B-team flying saucer that humans would make maybe 60 years ago. Stephen Greer has said that we've cracked gravity. We've had that licked since the 1960s or late 50s. And most of what you're seeing in the skies that looks like a UFO or a UAP is actually human technology. Most of them are ARVs. So this question of what Immaculate Constellation is actually set up to track is interesting, an interesting one, because is it tracking? I mean, it is tracking legitimate non-human craft, UFOs, UAPs, but apparently it's also tracking ARVs. And if it's tracking them, and if the program is, if Immaculate Constellation is run by our military or our intelligence apparatus, then it means other countries have ARVs. And maybe Russia is one of those other countries. Someone else has them, and they're tracking ARVs. So how deep does this actually go? It's a crazy interview. You've got to watch the full thing all the way through. Key takeaways for me: Matt Brown seems visibly uncomfortable with the entire conversation. He seems extremely tense, extremely nervous, extremely fearful for his own physical well-being and his own career. He seems like he has reached the end of his rope and is ready to come forward with everything he knows, thus this interview. But the things that he's fleshing out give us a lot of clarity, I think, on what Immaculate Constellation is, what it means, the reaction to David Grush coming forward, and many other things. I'm very curious to hear what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. Please don't be shy. I'm very interested in your thoughts on this. Don't forget to like and share this video. And hey, again, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It doesn't cost anything. It only takes a second, and it really does help us out. It's a heavy lift to build this channel from scratch, and we can use all the help we can get. So I thank you in advance. And if you really want to support us, you can become a member by clicking join on our YouTube page. You can join our Discord community. If you go to teamnightshift.com, you can pick up a piece of merch, or you can click on our Discord link there. That'll take you straight to our community. And you can even send me a message through the Make Contact link on our webpage that goes straight to me. So thank you for watching. Thank you in advance for becoming a subscriber and a supporter of Team Night Shift. I'll see you on the next one. Until then, keep looking up.